When we first set out to build Keystone Park, we didn't have the budget, resources, or even confidence to immediately tackle exotic species from all across the globe. We had to start small. That meant building a zoo with roots in our own backyard, animals local to the region and North America, species people could recognize and connect with instantly. This wasn't just a creative decision, but a survival tactic. We didn't yet have the capital for polar bear enclosures, jaguar rainforest, or even massive landscapes. What we did have, though, was determination to build something meaningful, one modest habitat at a time. This is exactly why we called it Keystone. The name comes from the term keystone species, animals so vital to their ecosystem that without them, everything else falls apart. Wolves, beavers, otters, bison, these are all keystone species, shaping the landscape that they live in. Keystone Park was built on that same philosophy. We wanted this zoo to be crucial for the understanding of wildlife local to the region, starting with the creatures right outside the door. Over time, this humble vision grew. The habitats got bigger, the species more ambitious, and the stories much deeper. What began as a budget-conscious regional zoo became something much more, a complete journey through conservation, storytelling, and design. This is the story of Keystone Park. The very first animals introduced to Keystone Park were timber wolves. This set the tone very well for everything that followed. The habitat was built around dense forest and rocky outcrops, designed to immerse guests in the feeling of North American wilderness. Guests can view the wolves head-on from behind glass, giving a sense of first entering the forest rather than looking down into a pit. The wolves roamed in duos, there were only two at the start, resting under shaded trees or climbing up under rocky ledges, always presenting different behaviors depending on the time of the day. From the start, Keystone Park emphasized education heavily. Wolves are apex predators but also keystone species, regulating prey populations and maintaining ecological balance. By opening with the timber wolves, Keystone Park established its storytelling voice. Habitats were never just exhibits, but lessons in ecology and environmentalism. For guests, the wolves are both mysterious as well as magnetic. They symbolize the wilderness, a connection to the untamed world that still lingers just beyond the edge of the human settlement. This is exactly where Keystone Park was founded. Of course, however, timber wolves aren't the only predator in North America, and a lot of them are much smaller. Meet the red fox, our second species introduced to the zoo. While the wolves represented wilderness in scale, the foxes highlighted adaptability as well as charm. Their habitat was significantly smaller, but no less detailed, filled with brush, fallen logs, and plenty of places for the foxes to dart, climb, and hide, with even the backdrop of an old abandoned cabin on our land left intact. By not immediately bulldozing this building left behind, we proved to be just as adaptive as the foxes. Red fox aren't pack animals like wolves, they're solitary hunters known for cunning and intelligence. Keystone Park leaned heavily into this contrast, giving guests a chance to see another predator that thrives not only in the deep forest, but also on the outskirts of towns and cities. This helped ground Keystone Park's mission even further. You don't have to travel to the remote wilderness to encounter wildlife. It's around us every single day, even if we don't always notice. The red fox habitat showed that Keystone Park wasn't just about spectacle, it was about storytelling through contrast. Wolves and fox, side by side, both predators, but living vastly different lives. After building for 2 carnivores in a row, we figured it was time to change things up, and built for the animal that ended up being the unofficial mascot of the zoo, the beaver. If the definition of a keystone species is something along the lines of helping shape an ecosystem, what do you call the animal that actually builds it? Beavers are ecosystem engineers, reshaping rivers and wetlands through their dam building. This is a textbook keystone species trait. Aside from their expensive underwater viewing, the main highlight of the beaver habitat was actually their educational cabin, and the message was quite clear. By building dams, beavers create the wetlands that support countless of other species. They're true keystone species at heart, demonstrating how a single animal can reshape the entire ecosystem. They did something very similar at Keystone Park itself, bringing the zoo into the mainstream. They were very popular right off the bat, and helped us get the name out there. On top of having the first captive birth in Keystone Park history, there's no wonder the beavers became as popular as they did. Next came our very first shared habitat for both raccoons and skunks. Many zoos highlight charismatic megafauna, but Keystone Park gave up space to underappreciated species who we often encounter in our daily lives. This enclosure mimicked edge habitats, a blend of woodland, hollow logs, and artificial dens. Raccoons climb, forage, and manipulate enrichment objects with their dexterous paws, while skunks, by contrast, move slowly and deliberately, often burrowing into shaded spaces or sniffing around for insects. This was one of the park's most educational builds. It highlighted the idea of coexistence with urban wildlife. Guests learned about the roles these animals play in controlling pests, dispersing seeds, and cleaning up carrion. The narrative wasn't about fear or nuisance, it was about mutual respect. Though small in scale, the shared habitat between the raccoons and skunks embodied Keystone Park's heart. It was a reminder that conservation isn't just about saving faraway species, it's about understanding and valuing the animals that live alongside us every single day. After quite a few small species in a row, next, we scaled up dramatically with the moose. This habitat captured the vastness of the northern wetlands, with shallow ponds, reeds, and forest edges. Elevated platforms allowed guests to look out over the water, often spotting the moose wading belly deep in search of aquatic plants. Moose are solitary giants, and Keystone Park used this to highlight the contrast between herd species like deer or bison and the independent, solitary life of a moose. Most creatively of all, we also decided to pair this with Keystone Park's very first restaurant, so any guest deciding to have a nice sit-down snack can get a great up-close and personal view of the moose while enjoying. The moose habitat gave Keystone Park scope and scale, proving that the zoo could handle megafauna beyond predators. For now, though, it was also the end of North America, however we would return. After forests and wetlands, Keystone Park turned indoors at the Reptile House. This was the park's first major indoor complex, and it showed a range of smaller species: snakes, lizards, turtles, and even some rare amphibians. The design emphasized immersion. Each enclosure was a microhabitat: desert terrariums with sandy burrows, rainforest tanks with misting systems, and aquatic setups for turtles. The Reptile House allowed Keystone Park to diversify beyond mammals, proving that the zoo could educate guests on smaller and less flashy species. Feedback on the Reptile House was overwhelmingly positive, and to this day is actually our most popular habitat in the entire zoo. What nobody immediately realized, however, was this was only the beginning, as the Reptile House behind it was hiding a great secret. South America was the first expansion to Keystone Park that really did deviate from our original mission. Instead of showing the beauty of our own backyard, now we are showing the beauty of the entire world, with species that guests realistically may never have seen or even heard of before. As predicted, to this day this is likely the most popular area of all of Keystone Park, and it all started behind the Reptile House with the giant otter. The habitat was heavily water-focused, with a large pool, underwater viewing, as well as lush vegetation. Giant otters are loud, social, and endlessly active animals, a perfect first impression for South America, and guests love watching them swim in coordinated groups. The giant otter habitat cleverly highlighted family dynamics. Guests saw how the giant otters lived and hunted together, reinforcing Keystone Park's theme of showcasing not just animals, but the social structures that define them. From a design standpoint, this was a technical leap. Managing water systems for such an active aquatic mammal pushed Keystone Park's skills to new heights, paving the way for even bigger aquatic builds in the future. Sharing space near the giant otters were the capybara, the world's largest rodent as well as one of the most popular zoo animals in existence. We never would have done South America without them. Their habitat combined land and water, giving capybaras space to swim, graze, as well as lounge in groups. Guests loved the capybara's approachable and laid-back energy. They often sprawled out near the pathways, unfazed by the crowds. Keystone Park leaned into this, using them as ambassadors for the South American ecosystem. The capybaras emphasized coexistence. In the wild, they live alongside countless other species, including predators like jaguars. By placing them near otters, Keystone Park created a South American-themed zone that highlighted diversity and interconnectedness. South America isn't all jungles and rivers, and we wanted to highlight that with the habitat very close to the capybara, built for the giant anteater. This habitat featured sandy soil and a wide-open grassland, very similar to where they live in the wild. This habitat was all about celebrating the strange. Anteaters don't fit into typical categories of predator or grazer, yet they play a vital ecological role by controlling insect population. Keystone Park used this to reinforce the message that every single niche matters. Guests walked away fascinated, realizing that conservation isn't just about familiar faces, but also protecting the odd and extraordinary. The anteater's popularity would help them in the long run, as they became a mainstay at one of our future projects. You'll have to wait and see, though. Next came the capuchins, Keystone Park's very first primates. Their habitat was vertical-focused. Ropes, platforms, and climbing structures filled up the space well, encouraging acrobatics and constant activity. Guests were drawn to their intelligence. Capuchin monkeys manipulate enrichment objects, solved puzzles, and interacted socially in complex ways. This brought a new layer of connections. Visitors weren't just watching the animals, they were recognizing behaviors eerily similar to their own. The capuchin habitat expanded Keystone's storytelling into primate conservation, connecting South American forests with broader discussions about deforestation and biodiversity loss. The capstone of Keystone Park's South American expansion was the jaguar habitat. This is one of the zoo's most visually striking builds, combining dense rainforest foliage with a large pool for swimming, showcasing the jaguar's unique affinity for water. Guests could see the jaguar prowling the undergrowth, lounging on elevated platforms, or plunging into the water with powerful grace. Feeding sessions emphasized their strength, as keepers used enrichment to mimic natural hunting behaviors. The jaguar embodied ambition. Keystone had started with small foxes and raccoons, but was now building immersive rainforest habitats for one of the world's most iconic predators. This was concrete evidence that the zoo had grown far past its humble beginnings. Speaking of those humble beginnings, though, after South America we circled back to what we knew, straight back to North America. We kicked off this new expansion with a massive grizzly bear habitat, with rolling terrains, streams, and rocky cliffs giving the bears free space to roam, forage, and fish. Guests viewed them from multiple vantage points, often catching the bears splashing around in the water or even tearing into their enrichment boxes. The bears were also a guest favorite, embodying wilderness and strength. Educational themes focused on coexistence, as many North American regions still grapple with human-bear conflicts. For Keystone Park, however, grizzlies marked another milestone, managing a massive carnivore in a complex, naturalistic setting. Afterwards, we circled back to the start of the zoo where this ambitious project first started to tackle our most extreme aquatic build yet, a shared habitat for the California sea lion and gray seal. Featuring an incredibly deep saltwater pool with an underwater walkable tunnel straight through the middle, the immersion in this habitat was absolutely off the charts. We obviously take all habitats at Keystone Park serious, but as the first impression of the entire zoo, we truly went above and beyond for this one, and the results speak for themselves. Observant guests noticed the contrast between the two species in the habitat, one loud and social, the other subtle and graceful. Feeding demonstrations became a highlight, drawing crowds as both species competed for fish. The habitat showcased not just the animals, but the special dynamic between them, bringing the sound and motion of the ocean to Keystone Park once and for all. In contrast, the prairie dog habitat was small but deeply interactive. Guest watch colonies be able to dig, chirp, and stand alert from very close proximity. The story here was all about community. The prairie dogs function as a society, each member contributing to the colony's survival. Keystone Park used this to talk about ecosystems and cooperations, proving that even the smallest animals on the planet can have lessons to teach. Next door neighbors to the prairie dogs, the bison and pronghorn share one of the park's largest builds, recreating the Great Plains of America. Wide fields, rolling hills, and panoramic overlooks emphasized scale and history. The bison brought power and presence, while the pronghorn added speed and agility. Together, they told the story of coexistence and resilience, species that nearly disappeared but now represent conservation success. The habitat helped give Keystone Park a sense of grandeur, a living landscape that captured the essence of the American plains. We then returned to where the habitat started off, the North American forest, one final time to culminate in the only big cat native to the region. The cougar habitat highlighted adaptability. Rocky outcrops, forested edges, and elevated ledges allowed the cougars to prowl and rest as much as they would in the wild. Enrichment simulated hunting, encouraging stealth and athleticism. Guests often saw the cougar perched high on its climbing equipment, often watching unseen. Cougars reinforced Keystone Park's local roots. Unlike the jaguars, these were our neighbors, predators that still live alongside human settlements. Their presence reminded guests that the wilderness isn't distant, it's still here. After completing North America, the king penguin habitat marked Keystone Park's entry into the polar climates. Artificial snow, chilled pools, and seasonal lighting were very new to us, but ultimately created a very immersive Arctic habitat. Guests marveled at their size, vivid markings, and underwater speed. The cold air and soundscape transported visitors into a brand new biome, broadening the park's reach. Educational themes focused on climate change and the fragility of the polar ecosystem, while the penguins themselves proved that Keystone Park could build immersive, world-class environments for animals far beyond its original scope. Acting as a bridge between the new and the old, the reindeer habitat expanded the polar theme with a rolling tundra, evergreens, and space for herds to move. Guests saw antlers grow and shed, connecting with the seasonal cycles. While familiar through folklore, reindeer became ambassadors for real Arctic ecology. Keystone Park used this connection to talk about migration, survival, as well as climate change. Small but captivating, the Arctic fox habitat recreated frozen dens and snowy landscapes, also drawing a parallel to the very start of the zoo with our red fox enclosure. Guests watched the foxes dart, dig, and curl against the cold, fascinated by their seasonal camouflage and adaptability. This habitat proved that even small predators could tell powerful stories of resilience and survival. After a bit of a reach of the Arctic expansion, Keystone Park grounded itself once again with a very simple petting zoo. Domestic animals like goats and sheep gave children direct connections through touch and care. This wasn't spectacle, it was intimacy. It showed that conservation begins with empathy, often sparked by the simplest of encounters. Afterwards, we did circle back to the Arctic expanse. The wolverine habitat was rugged and wild, combining forest, rocks, and streams. Rarely seen in other zoos, wolverines impressed guests with their power, energy, as well as general toughness. Interpretive themes focused on survival in harsh northern climates, trying to broaden the message about climate change. This habitat highlighted Keystone Park's willingness to showcase unappreciated species, not just the charismatic ones. This wonderful journey ultimately concluded with the polar bears, Keystone Park's most ambitious and resource-intensive build to date. Massive pools, icy landscapes, as well as a 360-degree underwater viewing tunnel gave guests a once-in-a-lifetime perspective on these Arctic giants. Polar bears embody both triumph and urgency. For Keystone Park itself, they embodied a finalized ambition, proof that the park had grown from a modest beginning to a world-class zoo. For guests, they symbolized nature itself, as well as conservation, as a living reminder of what's at stake as climate change continues to reshape the world. From timber wolves and foxes to polar bears and penguins, Keystone Park told a complete story from beginning to end. It began with a budget-driven necessity, starting small, starting local. But as the park grew, so did our ambition. Each habitat built on the last, each story layered into the next, until the park became something far greater than the sum of all of its parts. Keystone was more than a name, it was a philosophy, that every species has a role in the ecosystem, every animal has value, and every habitat can truly tell a story. Keystone Park embodied that belief tenfold, turning modest beginnings into a world-class narrative about conservation as well as creativity. And while the story of Keystone Park sadly has since come to a close, the journey continues elsewhere. If you'd like to relive every moment, you can watch the full 8-hour Supercut live on YouTube now, capturing the entire experience in one place. And if you want to see what's next, come join us in the sequel, Keystone Wilds. This time we're headed beyond North America, into the savannas of Africa and the jungles of Asia, in vast safari landscapes unlike anything we've ever built before. Keystone Park was only the beginning, and while unfortunately this chapter has since come to a close, the story has only just now gotten started. See you guys at Keystone Wilds.